And we voted on it back then. We voted on it 9 months ago on February 14th. There were two provisions to opt out of. Here's what the first opt-out vote looked like. And pay attention who's voting which way.
Motion to approve opting out of item 3D, provisions of PA 21-29, section 6A to D regarding allowances for accessory apartments, dwelling units, ADUs.
Second.
And there's a second by Councilman Cosgrove.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Any
They're in lag.
So you saw who voted against. Let's look at there was a second vote for opting out on the second half of this.
Okay, now we'll move to item 3E. Item 3E, I move that we opt out of the provisions of Connecticut General Statute Section 8-2D 9 as amended by PA 21-29, Section 4, regarding limitations on parking spaces for dwelling units.
Second.
Who did the
Who was
second?
that?
Was that you, Chris?
Cosgrove.
Yep. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
They liked the legislation, therefore passed the legislation. This is an argument on practice. This is not an argument on principle, which means all you would have to do is present them with legislation they don't like, and they would opt out of it. They like the legislation, therefore they're not opting out of it. This time, things were a little bit different because it was a unanimous vote with the same 3 Democrats now switching their votes to be part of the unanimous consent to opt out of both provisions. And as Hilary Ram goes, so do the Democrats, at least those 3 in the room. That's why, Hilary, if you're watching, this is why we're going to be focusing on you tonight, because as you go, so do the other Dames, if you will. And never once did the 3 of them bring up the principle of devolution. Now, it's true that the word devolution didn't come up at all in the meeting. It did come up from the Republican side in the February 14th meeting, but the concept was absolutely brought up. And they were, again, the Dames, if you will, repeatedly defended the actual content of the legislation. Again, I agree, too, with the content of the legislation, but it's not relevant, which is why we're not even bringing it up this time around. We already did, but it's not relevant to the point that's being made. On principle, you should be opting out, period, regardless of the content. Now, with that in mind, this is how the vote went this time.
We have a motion and we have a second.
Second.
Okay.
Now we have 3 seconds.
Okay, now 3 seconds. Okay. All those in favor?
In
This
favor
is-
of
this is
opting out.
Opting out.
Opting
In
out.
favor, the motion is to opt out.
That's
Make that
9,
clear.
9A, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Opt out.
Sal? Yes, 9A.
See the
Do-
nodding
then we
going
have to
on?
do 9B.
See Hillary?
All those in favor, raise your hands. Doug?
You can hear her say on the condition.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Next is 9B. Kate?
Yes, so I'd like to move to approve that the town opt out of the provisions of Public Act 21-29, Section 4D 9, prohibiting the zoning regulations from requiring multiple dedicated parking spaces for dwelling units.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor by a hand vote, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we have on the phone Councilman Skelly. Councilman Skelly.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
So, Hillary, what changed? Now, we saw at the beginning, I was trying to point this out, I don't know if you guys could catch it, Alexander Thomas nodding across nodding across the tables at Hillary, and we saw Hillary then, nodding back and whispering into Mary Jo Lindgren's ears, and you could hear the words on the condition, right, being exchanged between the two of them. So, Republicans in the room didn't change. If anything, they got more firm on Nahom's previous argument and more articulate in the matter. In fact, here's Chris Cosgrove with my nominee for town council speech of the year. This is clip 21. Go, Chris.
my one point is, this seems to be a solution in search of a problem. I don't see we have a problem.
That's a good point.
And in terms of, what's local control, I view local control is that we have some sort of standards in place that don't allow one person to infringe on neighbors' safety or their property value. And we put that control in the hands of our zoning commission and our zoning officer, who are answerable to the voters of this town. So to me, it's crazy to cede our rights, the rights of our public, to a few people at Hartford who think that they can write a law that can be equally applied over 169 towns. So that to me is just nuts. And if anybody, and once you opt in on that, then if our needs change, you can't change that. Look, what did we have? Did we have an issue with getting the state to change the timing of our lights on Bridge Street? Imagine if we need them to change zoning regulations. It'll never happen. Never. So we should never give up our rights to Hartford. And I will vote to opt out.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Like fist pumpingly awesome. So, guys, let me know in the comments what you think of Chris Cosgrove's statements there. Because I think it was perfectly spot on. It presents the argument on principle and as articulate a manner as I could possibly ask for. And Hilary's response demonstrates the point that I'm kind of alluding towards here. Go ahead, Hilary.
I agree that I think it's nice to keep, the local.
Nice?
It's nice.
I'm agreeing
I think
with
it's
what you're
essential.
saying. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but I think the spirit of the law, and I think that, I just said it again, but I have to say it again, the spirit of the law is to create more housing that people can afford, and therefore I think
So you
if
like
you're
the law?
going to go forward with what you were planning before, I think I would vote yes, because I know that that's, we're saying the same thing.
So you're in favor of the law, and you're voting to opt out because, as she just mentioned right there, that Bill Taylor has essentially conceded that this is going to happen through zoning, that exactly these provisions are going to be happening through the normal zoning process anyway. So Hilary, if you're watching, so folks know, you're not in favor of opting out on principle. You're in favor of the actual legislation itself, which means why would you opt out? So what's left? And, there was 30 minutes of back and forth that I'm not editing into this video. I'm not going through and editing down to somehow whittle down to probably still 20 minutes. You guys can watch the video of yourself. It's on the town of Milford's page. The entire exchange period was centered around prying a promise from Bill Taylor to get the exact provisions into place via zoning if opted out. Again, this is irrelevant to the argument on principle. And if you don't like the legislation and are opting out because of that, you wouldn't demand a promise to get this legislation through via another method. So what's left? We know the opt-out was going to happen with the 6 Republicans in the room. We know the base finds Hartford coming down on New Milford wholly unpalatable. We know you're going to now use this as a excuse me. We know you're going to now use this as a gotcha when zoning doesn't improve the exact verbiage we opted out of. The answer is optics. This is an argument on optics. This is the argument that won over the Dems. The weakest of all arguments is the one that actually won people over. Mike's rule played out before our very eyes last Monday night. Now completely undeniable.